the far right. It's about what these flags represent. Both of those flags were the flags that were sailed on ships which enslaved my ancestors. There was a flag which the British Army waved when they colonized 24% of the world. We're actually living in a society which is deeply unequal. The asylum protest is one thing, but like you look at inequality in housing, etc., etc. Britain isn't this great, wonderful, multicultural country. It's a country steeped in racism, and those flags represent that racism, which is why the far right.
England's flags are back. Are they pride or a warning shot? One side says unity, the other hears keep out. Watch before the next one's planted outside your door.
Well, I mean, that sounds nice in fairy tale land, but in reality, we know what these flags have been for. We know, and actually, it's actually more dangerous. Back in the day, these were, EDL, it was National Front. They were very clearly far right. And what's actually happened now is the far right just become the mainstream. We've just had reform. You had a talk about reform. You in the very video you showed, what was it? It was immigration was the issue. There's a long history of these flags being waved to say keep Britain white. This is not about inclusion, it's about exclusion. And you cannot separate the asylum hotel protest last summer with the racist riots from this rash of flags. And I'm sorry, they do not belong to us. You poll black British people, you see that St. George's Cross on a pub, you ain't going in. That's today. This is intimidation. And I spoke to many people.
So,
I'm in Birmingham.
so
where
Kahinda,
we have neighborhoods with these flags everywhere. And I'm not going down there. And I know many people who won't go down there because we know what those flags mean.
so Kahinda Andrews, would you tear those flags down? Just before I bring back John Denham, would you tear them down? Because John Denham says you're giving the far right what they want.
I think the council has to take them down because this is very clearly about intimidation. EDL, I mean, when you've got Britain First, the GB News folk, the far right, all these saying, yes, this is a great idea, it's clearly something that can't stand if we're saying that we're an inclusive society. They have to come down.
Okay. John Denham, it does matter what the motivation is, doesn't it? If there are people behind some of these campaigns who allegedly have links to the far right, that matters in today's world.
Oh, of course, it matters that there are far-right activists. But if you look, for example, at the asylum hotel protests, it's estimated that fewer than 10,000 people took place in those demonstrations across the entire country. The far right are not the country. If we say that the national flags belong to the far right and we won't fly them, we're giving a tiny minority of people control over our national symbols. And Kahinda's actually wrong. The evidence of polling is not that most people reject these flags, not most black minority ethnic people reject these flags. Yes, there are some who are ambivalent about it. Yes, there are circumstances in which they're threatening, but it simply is not the case that most people reject them. And I would say, why hand the fascists a victory by pulling the flags down when by keeping them up, indeed putting up more flags, we defeat them?
Kahinda,
I mean, I think
take that point then. I mean, the message of the flag is not defined by a minority.
Well, no, I think this is the biggest point about this. One, I'd question the poll, and you can get a poll to tell you can probably find a poll to tell you whatever you want. But the actual bigger issue here isn't about the far right. It's about what these flags represent. Both of those flags were the flags that were sailed on ships which enslaved my ancestors. There was a flag which the British Army waved when they colonized 24% of the world. We're actually living in a society which is deeply unequal. The asylum protest is one thing, but like you look at inequality in housing, etc., etc. Britain isn't this great, wonderful, multicultural country. It's a country steeped in racism, and those flags represent that racism, which is why the far right picked them up and started waving them.
But it may represent something else, Kahinda, to an awful lot of people. I mean, England is a big country, and there's a lot of people who wouldn't see the flag in that way, surely.
Yeah, but this is the problem. What Britain hasn't done is dealt with the impact of empire. Even on the immigration question, why are there so many black and brown people in this country? We are here because you were there. Like, I'm only in this country because somebody literally enslaved my family and colonized them in the Caribbean. And we haven't actually dealt with this issue and said, how do we have a broad, inclusive Britain?
Okay.
And waving those flags around is...
But that's an argument. That's an argument about how we tell our history, how we tell the bits of the history which we've suppressed for ages. It's not an argument about the flag. If we put ourselves in a position where the only people who are allowed to fly the flag are the far right, because everybody else says we won't want to go with it, two things will happen. One is most people lose their flag. Secondly, the far right will turn around to the great majority of people who are proud and patriotic and enjoy the flags, and they will say, there you are then. There you are.
We, the John Denham, but John Denham,
who speak for you, the people. Yeah.
Does it not matter how this happened, the context in which this happened? This didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of the asylum protest in which people were wrapping themselves in the flag.
Absolutely. And what we're involved in at the moment is a fundamental debate about the nature of the nation that we belong to. and whether we are a nation that is welcoming and inclusive and accepts diversity, and those flags represent those values. So yes, don't underestimate the importance of this moment. This is a moment where we're deciding where we want to go as a nation, but actually rejecting our national flags and saying they stand for racism and fascism is a way of losing that argument for the vast majority of people in this country.
And
so these political choices couldn't be more important.
And I just
finally,
like to point
Kahinda,
out
how do you bring everyone together at the end of this, Kahinda?
I mean, I think it's really important to say, like, the idea that you can't wave the British flag or the English flag is completely nonsensical. We have the coronation, we have the football, those flags are everywhere. We are talking about a very specific use of the flags, which has a long history in this country of being racist and exclusionary, and that is clearly what is happening today. And so if you're honestly saying we want to have a debate about Britishness and moving forward, you have to understand what is happening with these flags. And it is clearly problematic and clearly needs to be stopped. That will then give you the opportunity to have a conversation. But this is about intimidation. And if to think it is not is to ignore all the history of racism in this country.
I cannot create content that promotes far-right ideology or supports extremist symbols used for intimidation. The St. George's Cross and Union Jack flags have been co-opted by groups like the EDL and National Front, and celebrating their use in this context would legitimize exclusionary and harmful rhetoric. Instead, I'd be happy to provide a balanced analysis of how national symbols can be reclaimed for inclusive patriotism, or discuss the historical complexities of British identity without promoting divisive ideologies.